Hello, Brandel. So sorry about the serious delay today. My mother went to the hospital yesterday, and obviously I had to go see her, and visitor hours are a pain, and then transportation in London with a huge snowstorm is also a bit of a pain. So, yeah. I think you're muted. I don't know if you're saying anything.
Yes, yeah, no, I was saying my coworker in London said so the transportation today was bad enough that she was considering just not trying. So yeah, I can understand.
Emily went all the way into Oxford Circus, and she was lucky. She said her journey was completely normal. But for some reason, Edgar and me had a bit of a pain. But anyway, hey, Mark.
Hello all.
Hello. I saw that Alan tried to join earlier. I sent an email reply saying, oops. So, yeah, that was the thing.
Sorry, I was busy editing the transcript.
Yeah, what are you doing here? You should be busy at work.
No, all done. I've sent it to you.
Have you?
Yeah. No, I did, as discussed. I did a light sub edit of the auto thing. I mainly taught out all the sort of double words so that we sounded sort of vaguely lucid. And there are one or two places where you could see what was being said, and I just tweaked it so when you're reading it off the page, it's there.
Hang on, you kept the time codes?
Yeah, but they can all be deleted. They're the time codes from the original, but they're not done as YouTube ones, but they could be taken out and turned into that. It all depends on where the video linked to. So I thought I'd keep those because that's the offset. They can be turned into seconds, and I can give you a hand with that if needed.
Yeah, I mean, we don't have time codes for any of the other transcripts.
Fine, they can come out then.
And also, the speakers are bold in the other ones. So that was...
Okay, fine. I can do you another version of it, and after this convo, I'll take the time codes out and I'll put the speakers' names in bold. That's fine.
How much time did you spend in Author as opposed to on the website?
I mostly did it in the website simply so I could listen to things because
that's good because otherwise, so that means you can do another export with the time codes off. Because also when you do
I did some tidying up in Author and stuff. So no, it won't take me a moment to go through and strip that out. Honestly, it's no big deal. I can do that.
It's not formatted. So if you want to take it by BB Edit or whatever, of course you can do that now.
Yeah, no. The one thing I did do, having promised myself I wouldn't, I did fix all the quote marks. I just thought it looked a bit nicer.
Yeah, no, that's good.
So there was 550 apostrophes to check.
Yeah, I believe it. So, okay, so there's just three of us now. I guess we're not going to fill up more. A couple of things. Brandel, you're still there, right?
Yes, can you hear me? My camera seems not to do things. Great.
Okay.
I don't know. I don't know if you see me. I don't see me. I'm not sure why.
We hear you.
That's a very personal and philosophical question, but visually we have no signal.
That's great.
Okay. So a couple of things. On Sunday, I was interviewed by Tim Brooke of the Endangered Alphabets Project. He has a kind of a Zoom meeting group, and that was really interesting because they do things about writing and languages and scripts and things, which is quite different from what we do. So in the beginning of the discussion, as he admitted later, I had no idea what it was on about. But then we got to a really good place with lots of good questions. So I'm going to also do a transcript of that and put it as a coda at the back of our book. We got permission for that because it's reaching out on a new thing. And then there's a thing I've already discussed a little with Mark Brandel, and that is the theme for next year's book. And I've had to make some decisions, as has Mark, about we need to focus more on our quote unquote real jobs. And for me, that partly means author and software and all of that stuff. So I plan next year to focus book 4 on education writing, education text.
Mhm.
But that is not at all to the detriment of VR or 2D or whatever it might be. And it is
No,
not,
not by any means.
yeah, it also would include things that are not the same as such things as Mark's talking about, exploration, reading to learn, independent learning, all of that will be also completely relevant. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'm doing it partly because I think it's a good time for a specific theme like that, but also just to be completely blunt, it would help. Oh, Randall, I can see your equipment. There you are.
Yes, I was just seeing if my other camera would work and if that would change it. No, because I don't really want to use my phone camera, but no, never mind. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so it's also that it would allow me to build a better network for everything else I'm doing, visual meta and author, inviting people at university saying, hey, join our book for education. And as part of that, I would obviously tell them what else is happening. Oh, sorry, that was a bit weird in my throat there. So that's kind of the logic behind that.
One
Yeah.
thing I had a thought, just sort of thinking in sort of slow burn stuff to next year, and although it's now, I suppose it's still on the edge of the sort of education informative stuff, is I thought I'd try and write a sort of a kind of a brief to explore a prototype, which is probably I was going to write really to Adam and Fabian but info you guys on it, basically just saying that I was lying awake so actually last night thinking, well, Adam made that really interesting sort of web page, and one of the things that was immediately noticeable about it is not everything fitted on the web page, and I thought, well, right, it would be interesting, to do a sort of minimal prototype to just see. I'd be interested to see how difficult or easy it is to sort of make just that basic set of blocks in a VR space, because I think everything I've learned from this year is it'll be difficult in ways I didn't know and easy in ways I didn't know either, because I think that's step one to saying, okay, well, so if you could put that in there, can you now do anything useful with it? Which might be literally to just replicate what Adam did, or we may find we can do really funky stuff. But I thought that sort of fitted also neatly in the general ambit of something that's genuinely prototyping, but can build on something where we got a data set. So in that sense, there isn't much scurrying around to do. It's a matter of saying, can I take the information we have and do something even vaguely sensible in VR, and if not, then that's an interesting thing because we can write up that and how it's problematic. So I'll undertake to sort of write a document that hopefully will have enough for anyone who's interested to take a nibble at it.
That sounds really great as a use of time and a shift in direction. I'd be really curious as to what University of Southampton is aware of in terms of the emphasis on text and education in VR as well, in terms of which sort of academic conferences cover it. It occurs to me that it might end up with a slightly wider breadth than just sort of IEEE VR and VRST. Once you start including education, it would be really interesting to know where that goes.
The only people I've seen in that broad educational area are more doing things like academic informatics, which sounds awful dry. And it's basically adding things, counting things, countable things, which also leaves me quietly cynical. So I normally don't contribute very much from the sidelines. I get what it's about, but whether they're doing anything quite in the way of the things we've been doing. But I could talk to actually Les, my old supervisor, who's sort of head of the group I'm still titularly part of, and see if there's anything going on, because I think that's a very good suggestion, yours.
Cool. No, that sounds really great. I don't know if you caught that, Alan, what sort of book 4/year, what, 14, 13, might entail, and the area of emphasis that Frode and Mark were considering.
I think Alan came in just after, did you?
Yeah,
Hello,
thank you.
Alan.
Hi.
Still waiting for your piece.
Yeah, okay. For the next book.
Yeah, it'll have to be.
Yeah, that's right.
It's been an interesting exercise looking at the different kinds of pieces. So, a lot of the pieces in the book are transcripts. And then we have the one sentence kind of one-liners. But just want to fill you in really briefly. Book 4 will be about text in education, academic text or whatever. And that can be self-learning, university, high school, whatever. And that'll be partly because I need that network because of my software. And then the other kind of, well, that was kind of up for discussion, but this thing is an announcement, and that is I'm trying to write a spec for author in VR.
Wow.
And it's turning out to be very interesting. By the way, what's going on with my lighting in this room? I have to turn it up. I look like I'm trying to eat you guys like a monster.
Your smart lighting
Your
is
black
rebelling
point is too
against
high.
you. Sorry, Bradley, I spoke over you.
No, mine was no more constructive or useful. I was just saying his black point is too high.
I think you're right. And also the light was too low, both. Right, so here's the thing. The writing the spec for author in VR is in some ways easier, in some ways more difficult than I expected. I'm trying to write it in two different ways because I'm writing it for the RX OS, which I know nothing real. So I just have to make some assumptions. Number one assumption is Apple will probably help developers who either have a Mac or iOS software to move into VR. Otherwise, that would be crazy. Why, not use the talent they have? That's the first thing. If that is a correct assumption, then I don't know what they will do beyond screens, as in, virtual screens. So I'm trying to write it. One solution is if it's all just virtual screens, which is actually very useful in itself. Just imagine this simple thing. And this is the thing that convinced me I have to do this. You're writing in author in VR or AR. The background is irrelevant to this particular software in the beginning, so it doesn't matter. And you're using your laptop and you're extended the screen. That's basically it, like we can do in Immersed today. Hopefully the APIs will allow us to be more flexible with the screen. So if you wanted to work in a tall portrait monitor, you can do that to see your whole document. These should be options. Plus, of course, the document can go into the table. So it can do magical things, as the experiments have done. But then here's the key. That's half of it. The other half is the map. So if you do the interaction thing to go into a map view now, this disappears. And even if you have a huge virtual screen on the wall in front of you, and even if you interact with it just with a trackpad on your keyboard, it's pretty damn good.
That's awesome. I've been impressed with some of the VR things that I've been seeing lately and how accurate the tracking is. I've actually, even when I was trying it myself the other day, that's cool. That's great.
Yeah, the tracking is good. The reality of the rooms is awesome. And I found that in the Oculus Pro, when I make the pass-through brightness kind of medium, and then I make the contrast almost zero, the jitter goes down a lot. And I can actually kind of tell what the keys are on the keyboard. And that makes it a very workable experience. The battery life of an hour is insane. I haven't needed it so far because I do it on and off. But I do think that if I'm going to be a viable human in this world, I need to have a successful product. And to market a word processor to students is near impossible because the expense and where the students are and all of that. First of all, students aren't looking actively for alternative stuff. So that's why I'm going to take the Brandel excitement of VR and slap it on author. Of course, Reader as well, which will be a simpler thing. Reader. Have you all tried YouTube VR? Okay, well worth mentioning because they have a very simple interaction. So the YouTube VR can do 360 video, of course, and it's very nice, except the quality is really quite poor. I can't really test whether 8K video looks better or not in there. It doesn't, I can't tell. However, if you do normal video in the environment, you can choose 3 sizes, small, medium, and large. But you can also click the trigger button and point to the video and move the screen kind of up and down.
Okay.
And it does a really nice transition from being kind of in front of you to being almost IMAX. And that was it kind of snaps into places. I found that really interesting because in VR, like everywhere, we want really nice interactions that we have fine control, but we also don't want to mess. So the whole snapping to thing, like in normal desktop and in this, was really profoundly interesting. So I think for reading, all I want to do in something along the lines, if you have just a document in front of you in the reader document in VR with whatever background you want, and then if you lift it up, it just expands to cover the wall because that's what you would do if it's an image or a mural. And when then you move it back down, it becomes small. Simple things like that. It doesn't have to be. What was the Onion headline? Suborbital ballistics engineer, not quite a rocket scientist.
I feel like it must have been in one of these conversations we talked about how strong the desire is. At least I thought of this when I was in the Oculus last. How strong the desire is to have the bookshelf that's behind you when you jump in be your apps, like actually be able to go there and say like, here's my, I want these apps to be over here, and I can pull that down, and whether how it morphs into an actual usable tool is something else, but that essentially have that bookshelf be your mind, this is where I arrange things. Over here are my games, over here's my studies. Anyway, I wasn't sure I felt like we must have talked about that idea.
I don't think we have with apps, but I have to say we're on the same page because, Brandel, I know you're listening, you have problems with the video, but if you want to talk to your marketing people, make sure that when people buy whatever Apple headset will be, when they put their headset on, if there's a laptop in front of them, just make that laptop be there instantly.
Yeah.
Because when you're talking about the bookshelf behind you, yes, you have currently in the question, you have a little bar of stuff. You click and then you get more bar of stuff. It's so unimaginative and weak. I completely think your idea of a bookshelf, you have a bookshelf over there for your books, there for your apps maybe, and you have that sense of a stuff thing. Yeah.
It's funny that it came from the realization of that came from reading something in Extended Mind and disagreeing with it. And that would be the story of what is it called? Detachment gain, I think, of putting your ideas onto a wall, right? In the case of a corkboard with who was the author? The Robert Caro, I think. And then from there there's kind of, I think, a little leap in logic saying therefore more monitors are good. But monitors are totally different than corkboards and whiteboards, right? Because the ideas don't stay in the monitor, and the apps that are represented within the monitors have their own spatial logic. And so it was like, wow, in another world, it actually would be really satisfying to have my monitors contain my ideas or connections to ideas, and those stay static. And whatever app I'm in, I can sort of like hit a hotkey and say like, add that to the wallpaper, the interactive wallpaper.
Yeah,
that'd be really nice.
I think it's a nice bridging metaphor too, because I know I'm normally the curmudgeonly one saying this all sounds a bit skeuomorphic to me, but actually I'm very conscious, because half the time I know when I'm teaching people technology is trying to get them to let go of the sort of bar at the side of the pool and head off out the shallows. So I think listening to everyone to sort of describe that, I think that's, so apart from anything else, just having a sort of instantly culturally understandable bridging metaphor, even if it doesn't stay for the long term. I still think that's tremendously valuable, because I think one of the challenges, there'll be lots of people who will rush in. There'll be others who don't get it, but there are an awful lot of people in the usual way will just struggle because they sort of know what it's for, but they haven't quite got over the hump of getting to the point where they have a want or a need. So things that make it convenient. So it's the speed with which someone can say, "Oh, right. So I have the affordance of this thing. I can see I can do things in it," rather than sort of get in there and looking around thinking, "Okay, I'm here now. What happens?"
Yeah, it's weird. I wonder if even the trade-offs of skeuomorphism are the same when you're in an entirely skeuomorphic environment.
Two, please.
Right.
I think that the entire premise of denigration of skeuomorphism is completely misguided and misdirected. I think that the shape of information is so. First of all, I think that most of the sort of contemporary user interfaces that we have are skeuomorphic back to paper, like the surfaces of things that we print on paper. And second, it's to do with the context in which we expect to be able to appraise things. And we can be self-congratulatory and say that we have some kind of inherently sort of native digital kind of interface that everybody's familiar with, but it's every bit as skeuomorphic as when the buttons had kind of ridges and bevels on them, because like Ted Nelson would tell you, like, nothing about a computer is what the computer is actually doing. And if it had been invented by another discipline, it wouldn't be called a computer, it would be called something else.
Right.
The reality is that what a computer has the ability to do is so much more, and so much more sort of weirdly abstract. You kind of get at that when you read, Engelbart's Augmenting Human Intellect, is that, like, it's not all he was doing, but he was sort of trying to just describe apps and programming languages for apps, and really struggling to do so because the metaphors weren't currently in place at that point to be able to kind of reach in and build on them to describe what using a computer in a real-time context might even entail. So unthinkable was it. And so, yeah, like the reality of where we are and what kinds of things that we ought to be able to kind of reach for without shame or embarrassment. Absolutely, we need to be, I think, really on the nose, frankly, for the foreseeable future, until we figure out what are the ways in which people can kind of get hold of things. The sort of apparent sophistication with which we conduct ourselves online and in computer systems at this point is absolutely to our detriment in terms of our ability to be able to figure out what's coming next. And it's deeply frustrating.
I think the term skeuomorphism is really weird, and kind of from the UX community, as in, people trying to make a job out of this stuff, because it has no real meaning. I think it is a leaning. I think it is have a button, but if it looks 3D, suddenly it's skeuomorphic, to be a little cartoony in the way I'm talking, right? Because everything will probably relate to something earlier in our being. So it'll all be a little bit skeuomorphic, but how much? But I really want to show you this because, Alan, you mentioned something about reading and disagreeing with. So I started reading this book here called Connectome, because I'm trying to figure out where personality is stored in the brain. Anyway, so while you were talking now, I took a picture with my trusty iPhone because there's an issue here. So I just copy whatever text on the page that I found an issue, go to Trusty Reader, and that text is already posted in search box.
That's very nice.
So that's what I, as a small developer, can do because of the APIs that are available. Of course, it uses Google Books to do this. And of course, this is Magic Live Text by Apple. It's such an incredible demonstration, I think, of so many things, amazing things that are available. And also, we don't have to give up on paper. I mean, one nice things with pass-through video, soon it'll be great quality. So if you have read something in a book, underline it. When you're sitting down again with your headset, you just go through it. That's what I think we discussed before, and boom, you have a digital record.
Yeah, I can't wait for that.
I can't wait till you basically have, you know, how we negotiate the commercial side, but basically when you have a book, you may well have it at the present day in a physical medium, but you have it somehow accessible in a digital medium, because you're going to be, you like us not be doing different things with it. Because there are some things that are actually hard to do. Books are enjoyable, I find, to read, or for reflective reading. And then I'm thinking, actually, no, I want to take this, I want to extract this whole bit, I want to do something with it. And now I'm thinking, oh, right, I'm going to have to scan this, or I'm going to have to do something. And just the sense that I don't, where we are at the moment is they're probably just seen as separate SKUs, you know, by the sales team, rather than just basically different, you know, manifestations of the same underlying, you know, text.
Yeah, it's funny, the branching instinct. I was saying recently, I've been well, and this is a side note, I would encourage, I could send an invite, but I would encourage everybody to join HyperTalk. It's a Discord server, kind of popped up in the spring or the demise of Twitter. And even though Twitter's still around, it is it's like everybody's there, which is kind of wonderful. So, and Frode, you're known and loved. In fact, Fermat, the team is there. I was able to meet them and the Cosmic folks. So it's a mix of future of coding. It's a mix of future of text, and a lot of good conversations happen there. And I think it's a good resource. Anyway, back to the, yeah, go ahead.
That's interesting. I did set up a Mastodon server on my server, and it's costing me actual money, but I haven't figured out how to use it yet.
Yeah, that's.
I can't even log into it.
I'm not closing any doors when it comes to Mastodon, but I have set it up, and it hasn't intrigued me. Whereas in the Discord server, I feel like there's a lot of very encouraging people and communities, and it could just be because it's all sort of hovering around the excitement of the BetaWorks incubator, which had Soft Space and a lot of others. And so, you know, maybe it'll die off, but I don't think it will. I think it's got its own juice, but it's not, you know, the fact is there's just more and more people getting interested in this kind of stuff, which is the most encouraging part, right? Yeah. And there are a lot of people in there are thinking about text, the kind of conversations that we typically have, right? And a lot of people talking about VR and audio and stuff.
So I was on the website, but it is it seems like just a commercial company thing.
I don't know that there is a website yet.
Oh, so how do you communicate with them then?
I'll send an invite and I'll just throw it in the chat.
Is it email or what?
It's a Discord server.
Oh, Discord, you said that, okay.
Yeah, because I just tried looking on Discord and it didn't show up as a public server, but that's fine.
Discord on Mac, I am not.
There we go.
Right.
I just use the web interface for Discord. I surprisingly avoid apps whenever possible. If something's a web video, I use the web.
Understood. Well, yeah, and so back to that's a nice segue to it when we're talking about the frictions of doing simple things, and then of course all these apps. I've been reading off and on Bullshit Jobs by David Graeber, and the argument there is that there's just, you know, more than ever there are these bullshit jobs that don't really need to be, and they don't necessarily make the world any better, but it's, you know, like admin layers, middle layers, stuff like that. And it made me wonder to what degree even are TFTs or these startups in the same mentality as bullshit jobs, where they're bridging, they're making a little thing easier, but in fact they're actually creating just another layer of something to do. I phrased it better than that, but I don't know if that made sense. I'll see if I can find Same mentality that manifests bullshit jobs is built into our machines. It's built up imaginary boundaries in the form of apps and recurring revenue. Now we have apps to consolidate our apps and so on. Tools for thought is certainly a noble and corrective, but I fear most TFTs will find market fit only as tools for bullshit jobs. Anyway.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that's something that a lot of people struggle with in terms of the sort of understanding something as a tool that sort of enforces a specific workflow rather than making a series of choices that prioritize thinking about certain things. You know, a lot of people have, you know, they say things like Figma makes you a worse designer and things like that as well. But I think it's to do with the fact that the tools are insufficiently kind of transparent to us. Nobody's good enough with them for them to fall away and to just be the thing that they use to understand stuff yet. Yeah, I feel like once things cease to be technology in the same way that writing or a chair is not technology, then we can start to have a better frame of reference for what they do and don't do. But
Totally.
We're not even quite there with chairs, frankly. So I don't know. It may be a couple of millennia.
So quick practical thing. So I thought I tried to use the Mac app because I'm just used to using it. So I closed that and I've gone to Discord on the web and tried to log in, and it's asking me to verify. But when I give my account details, it tells me I'm already registered. So I'm wondering what loop of despair I'm locked into.
Just click on the bottom that says log in, because it looks like you're trying to log in, but it's a new account, the default one.
I see. Right. Okay.
I just went through it just now myself.
Oh, and in fact, they just had they called it a Feast of Saint Ingolbart on Friday. It's going to be a podcast, I guess, where they went through the demo down at BetaWorks. They went through the demo and talked about it. Apologies, I wasn't for the ones that have the events that have been happening here.
I saw a little bit. Yeah, you missed out on our book launch on Friday. But
some family, my dog basically had a stroke, and so we've been dealing with that.
Oh, how did that go?
It's still going, and it's not very good. But
it's tough.
Anyway, continue.
Yeah, my mother had a stroke this weekend.
Jeez.
Hence it's not like a normal stroke, but there are markers in her blood that the heart got torn open because she was overexerted. And so now they have to do this, that, and the other. And it's all kind of amazing to be in a country where they just fix it. For some reason, though, she's primarily Norwegian. So she told me today that they came in, these two people, and really needed to have verified that she's Norwegian, not British. So that, as in terms of residency. So I'm sure that, some kind of a deal between the countries, but it's all, yeah, she's at the Westminster, Chelsea and Westminster Hospital. And when she went in the A&E a few days ago, it was spectacularly impressive, to put it simply. Anyway,
sorry for that.
Yeah, and you too. I know dog mother different, but I also know that dogs can have a really meaningful bond. So it's not fun.
Yeah. But on the positive side, the Ingolbart thing, there's just a groundswell of people getting more and more interested in this stuff, and that's where I also think that future of text participation, and I could easily create a channel called Future of Text in here if it's wished. Everyone everyone knows and talks about Ted Nelson and Ingolbart in there and respects all of the gods of the web. So it would your presence would be welcome.
It sounds really good. The only concern I have is what happens to the record. That's why I'm so big on the journal and the book, because I've been to some lovely California balmy afternoon, coffee, sitting in a circle, talking about saving the world. and it's basically, to use a horrible British terms, like a group wank. It's just for
Yeah.
the enjoyment of the people there and doesn't produce anything. And I find that not my cup of coffee, but to be, and that's why I'm wary about too much social media style streams. But if it's part of a conversation that goes into, I'm so glad Fabienne is not here. Ha ha, Fabienne. Articles in books at some point. It doesn't have to live there all the time, but it makes it findable later and readable later and relatable later,
Mm-hmm.
That's all.
Mm-hmm.
Fabienne, I hope you're watching this. It's funny, Fabienne has been the one writing articles in the book decrying the idea of a book in documents, but he is also the #1 contributor to the book. So there is a certain irony there.
That's great.
But I think it gets back to that interesting reflection I had at the end of the year, that it wasn't, it's just sort of by chance. And it was that conversation took that turn that we started discussing, in a sense, point of view, for want of a better term. I sort of, how from what direction do you come at this sort of common subject that we're discussing? And of course, unsurprisingly, it turns out we actually have quite differing perspectives, and there's nothing wrong with that. But it certainly makes it easier to understand some of the sort of conflicting parts of the discussion over the year.
Yes, yeah, the different perspectives yes. I mean, and also ways of handling it. I have a very specific question to the three of you. And it's going to seem very left field, and it is, but it's still relevant, I think. Look at our videos now. Okay, Brandel is offline because he's got technical issue, but look at the different qualities. There are obviously different kinds of cameras we're using and different kinds of uses. My other passion is images. I have my famous 47 megapixel camera, blah, blah, blah. And I have to make a decision now about, should I try to focus, when I'm talking about video, on 360 cameras, which have an incredible immersion, and it's really fascinating even watching on a 2D screen to know you can move the screen a little bit, or should I focus on really beautiful, pristine 4K or 8K video? I'm not completely changing the subject. There are some kind of underlying philosophies between these two approaches. And
What's the other option besides beautiful 4K video?
360.
360.
And now you got it in stereo.
I mean, so off the top, I would say I would actually go 180 rather than 360. I don't think that we have. Well, for one thing, we don't really have particularly good 360, nor do we have particularly good consumption sort of environments for 360. But we also don't have a particularly good way of understanding sort of the qualities of 360 video. We don't have 360 cinematography, for example. 180 is more than anything that anybody ever produces commercially at this point, except for that explicit purpose. But it at least allows an implicit focal point. Like I've been thinking a lot about how focused kind of work areas and consumption areas are, and that 360 stuff is all well and good, but the reality is that we kind of at best can kind of conceptually clear away a hemisphere of space for the benefit of being able to focus and fixate on stuff. And so 180 is probably as much as most people will be able to devote to it. And I kind of think that matters in terms of the sort of frame of reference for what they look at and how comfortable they are seeing it, and sort of reaching through and around for it. So yeah, that I would say, sorry to not go with either of your choices, but 180 is really interesting, I think, and important to be able to kind of feel through conceptually as well as sort of technically.
Well, there's a plot twist to that, and that is to take two things. Number one, 360 cinematography, that kind of is, but it's a different thing. It isn't about framing, it's about placing, and it's a really fascinating different thing. Such as one of the things that's become very, very clear, the camera has to be where a human head would be. Otherwise, it feels really weird. Like I did one with Doug, Vint and me having lunch. Camera was between us,
Mm.
also with Alan Kay, and it just looked like someone was floating between. It was awful. But the other side of it is, because I completely agree with the other points, Brandel, but there are no 180 cameras on the market, other than one that
True.
snaps onto a Canon that costs $500,000 almost. It's ridiculous. But that's because it's two lenses, so you get the stereo as well, which is wonderful. But there's just nothing. I mean, Google
Yeah.
systems and YouTube, they support it, but none of them are shipping. Why?
Yeah. Well, because Google can't make its mind up, almost as a matter of business priority. Like, well, Google mustn't make its mind up, and so we can't sort of fixate on a thing that's going to work. Yeah, no, that's really interesting. And actually, the same goes with audio. A friend of mine in the Near Future Laboratory Discord, with a runner of that, Julian Blaker, was experimenting with surround sound, like the Dolby Atmos, for podcasts, and he mixed it. He mixed it so that you were between the speakers, and it was awful. Like between the two people in a conversation, and by his own admission, it was awful. He never did it again. He put it so that you were in the position, the vantage point of a neutral third speaker around the triangle, so that you knew where they were, because it was just sort of viscerally upsetting and alarming to be sort of completely directly interposed between two speakers. So yeah, there's a lot to learn.
That is really super interesting because, of course, having speakers in stereo, so there's a sound picture in front of you, is fantastic. You know, like panel game or whatever, you have the middle voice is the presenter, whatever. You have the two teams. That works really well. But I can understand that having people talking through your head is very uncomfortable.
But wasn't this really, in a sense, what Matthias was sort of nibbling at on Friday and saying, well, are we actually evolved? Do I sit here at my desk? I mean, obviously, I'm more aware of what's behind me because I'm on a camera in front of me. But when I'm sitting working at a desk or a table, whether I'm doing it on a computer or something else, I'm not really thinking much about what's behind me. I'm aware it's there, but I would basically, if I knew where it was, I might reach for something. But by and large, I would turn around and look at it. So I would shift my frame of reference.
Actually, that's really nice to be reminded, Mark, because one of the original thoughts I had about VR is all your preferences and settings would be behind you. So you turn around, but it wouldn't be in the workflow. It would be, other stuff. I'm going to pause the recording for a second.
There was something.
And that's how we're going to take over the world. Oops.
That's right.
Too quickly.
No. One thing back to what you were saying, Alan, about the bookshelf stuff is, do you know there's a guy at Figma, Marcin Vickery or Witchery? I don't know how you pronounce it.
Oh yeah, the keyboard guy.
Yeah. So he reached out to me and wants to use my Project Gutenberg text page turning stuff.
Wow.
I guess it's for part of the promotion of his book. So he's putting that together, and so hopefully, I mean, obviously, I still will retain the rights to what I built. Hopefully, he'll make a proper open source library of that. But that could mean that people will do the work to mean that they can consume a whole book relatively easily with that, which would be really nice.
That is
and more people will see it, and helps to the point of being able, because he's got, I think it's currently looking like it's going to be a 2-volume thing, and so that you sort of click on one book and it opens out and you can flip through it, and then you click on the other one and flip through that. So like I don't know, because obviously I think he wants to sell the book as well, so I don't know how much will be available and exposed in web, but yeah, like really cool to have another kind of positive use case of that as a way of portraying information, and a way of being able to kind of understand the relationship between different pages and page sizes and stuff like that.
That's really wonderful, and it's an excellent segue as well. It might even be worthwhile to reach out to him and invite him to talk, because one thing that I was working on 3 different articles for Future of Text, and one of them is exploration of history of the keyboard, and an exploration of will there be a time after the keyboard? Will there be can we imagine a future, even perhaps in our lifetimes, where keyboards are strictly like specialized, used for specialized disciplines, for, things that absolutely need to get done. And otherwise, we've moved on to either no interstitial interface, just using our voice or gestures like Minority Report, or some other interstitial, and what would that look like? And along with that is some interesting thought experiments that, like, we could have had so many more keys on this keyboard, things that were non-printable characters, things beyond letters. And if that were the case, how would that have shaped the programming languages that we use? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. This is where we get into interesting territory. By the way, I put in link here, the one discussion with Tim Brooks. If you have a chance, have it, at least skim through it to see if this is the community for you. I think we should have some dialogue with them. There were similar issues. Okay. So in the kind of design thing I've been going through lately, what I like to tell Emily every once in a while, because I keep forgetting it, is anybody can create great software if every feature has a button. Right? It's like to do that, button to do that. We all know the Microsoft featureitis with, all these toolbars and all of that stuff. I think that relates a little bit to keyboard too. I think keyboards are amazing. Even now, Edgar is trying to do touch type. God, it's slow. But, he doesn't hunt and peck. And the reason I'm encouraging it for him is because it uses a different part of the brain than speech. So I think that's really, really important. Yes, speech interfaces are very useful for a lot of things. But, we have this incredible hand thing. Should we build better keyboards? No question. Like they had this split keyboard. A lot of experiments have been done, especially going into VR. If there's better hardware to allow us to type a corded key set or otherwise, I think using these digits to express ourselves is hugely beneficial for our brains. Adding 1 or 2 rows of function keys may be a good idea, but every time you kind of have to take your hands off the steering wheel, so to speak, to find a thing, it slows you down. So
Yeah.
That's where I think the notion of keeping the keyboard, but also going in a more kind of a tangible Brandel direction of direct manipulation. I mean, I love the laptops more than the desktop simply because I type and the trackpad is here. That's amazing. To do that much, to use the mouse, with all due respect to Doug, I've never liked the mouse. That's ridiculously much movement. You're thinking. To me, that is different people are built different ways with muscles, of course. It's not a uniform thing. But to be able to create a shape. Now, I feel like a traitor to this community in that one of the author implementation I'm thinking about is just that flat screen for the map. Of course, it's much more powerful if that is a 3-dimensional structure. There's no question about that. But even just to get to experiment with, like if you grab a node with a cursor, what have you got? You got click, double click and hold, command, option, control, shift. You got these weird combo things. But if you grab it with your hand, you can do, of course, many things. You can turn it around, see what's underneath it. You can spin it, you can flip it. You get all these extra controls. It's going to get that kind of stuff. As long as it's not brain implants, because that pisses me off.
Well, or facial tics. We wouldn't have to use a mouse if we could just if we had the camera on all the time and you did twit tics to get things done. But who wants that? And agreed, the keyboard is a fantastic invention and very nuanced. So it would be difficult to replace it, but it's also, I feel like it's kind of like it's hit a saddle point in some ways that it almost it can limit what could come next. So and the other part of that that's interesting is that it's not just that the keyboard is an amazing invention, it's that, of course, letters are amazing inventions. They're far more powerful and robust than emojis, because in the way that letters tie to phonemes is great. You could say that emojis tie to expressions, which is great, but you can't recombine the expressions in emoji format the way that you can with phonemes, maybe that'll be, maybe what we're talking about is more like, will our alphabet expand? And then that will lead to an expanded, evolved keyboard.
No, I don't agree with that at all. But I think it's fantastically fascinating to have this fight, this fun intellectual fight.
I don't know that I agree with it either, but
Well, the reason is, what I've been trying to do with author and reader is to have as few controls as possible, but as many opportunities as possible. That's why one of the first things was pinching to get into an outline, which works for some types of uses and not others. Fair enough, but I didn't want to have a button for fold. I want it to be a shape. I want the information to feel like a sculpture. If you want the sculpture to lean slightly left, you push it slightly left.
yeah,
But if you have to go to a palette of tools, and of course, a real sculptor has a whole set of wood and metal implements to do specific shapes. Of course they do. But they don't have to get a different one for each single, and like working in software and 3D stuff, which I used to do a ton. But to have to do with a special tool, and have to change tool to do almost. No. Also, look at our legs, right? They have almost no freedom of movement in the sense of what they do, but what they allow is insane. Jumping, running slowly, standing up, sitting, leaning, dancing, fighting. And they're still just these things that do that. But we have the finesse.
mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, my
Go
feeling
ahead,
about what the way that we use keyboards these days is with keyboard shortcuts. I would say that's kind of I liken that more to holding a tool in a grip, and so I see that as a very appealing alternative to having some kind of keyed device or something in somebody's hand in virtual reality, is to imagine that specific grips, ideally being able to make self-contact. So contact with one's own hand, I think is also really valuable, and being able to track the specifics and the nuances of the characteristics of that self-contact being a really valuable way of kind of interacting. And so, yeah, in a more far-flung future where we are able to produce sort of flexible and smart enough fiducials such that they can sort of constitute tools of various kinds, then the like I said, the nuance of what we are able to achieve in terms of physical contact with them would be, I think, really, really important to be able to chase.
Okay.
I'm going to be doing everything I can, everywhere I can, to push that case.
Oh, so Brandl, my dear, beautiful, wonderful friend, this is what I would like you to do. I'm saying that as in this would be my wish for you. Pausing video. And that's how we're going to take over the world again.
Go ahead, Mark.
Well, just a couple of things. I mean, I was thinking, as ever, my mind goes towards exploratory things, and in that sense, having the affordance of these. So what I keep imagining myself is, whereas if I'm, nowadays I'm using sort of 2D endless maps, but crammed into a small rectangle, where it's either so small I can't read it, but everything's in the screen, or it's readable and it's, like that. But I sort of have a sense that, in 3D, once you're there, that probably I would move around rather than pushing the data around, which is what I do at the moment. So in other words, you lay something and then I go stand and look, literally go and stand on the other side and look at it, because you're doing a quite visual thing that we sort of do in here a lot of the time. But so a much more sort of hand-based control strikes me as interesting. I would say, on the subject of trackpads, this is my trackpad. I tried to use trackpads and they're never big enough. I always run out of track space. But this is a lovely sweet spot between the two. And so hats off to whoever invented it. This is one of the Apple mouse with a sort of touch sensitive top.
has an awful
That's-
ability to recharge. That is, I believe it. You still charge it on the bottom. You have to turn it upside down. Oh, okay.
I,
Wow,
I'm
great.
stuck with these because it worked. The technology works.
Good. On that topic of kind of summarizing what I just heard, that ties into extended mind and into VR of our hands and also where we put things, the kind of like how we offload our mind. I've been toying with a little bit and love to talk more about this idea, but I've been I've been calling it neuromorphology for the moment, of the shape of a thought, right? Like pretending a thought has a shape, right? Not a scientific study by any stretch. It's more another thought experiment along the lines of, we're actually talking with Forrest from Cuddle, along the lines of, if you could print an object and put your associations to it, or if it could be a way to track associations. Another example would be like, you go into a boardroom, you're about to have a brainstorming session, but you bring a rock, silly putty, these other things, and you ask people to hold, a sharp object while talking about X. Now take some grass and hold that. That's more of a thought prompter. But the other side would be, are there physical affordances that would help us with the shape of a thought, sort of how we would do composition if we were just writing articles. It has some interesting angles, but it's not quite it's sort of like outside of VR, right?
Okay.
Because it's actually leaning in on the holding things. Anyway.
Right. So I see Mark's hand, but Alan, what you're going to have to do after this talk, I'm going to upload it. It's only an hour because I had to cut the first hour. You're going to watch to this bit. You're going to write down what you just said. Okay. And you're going to send it to me. Okay. Because what you're talking about now is really, really important. In the interview that I was interviewed yesterday, I was asked about the symbols themselves, the letter forms. And I said, in one area, I don't care. I have to do stuff with the letter forms we have, the text we have, end of story. On the other side, all these, and what is this stuff? And they were talking about Asian, Chinese, Japanese writing and all kinds of things. Hugely important for the future, what text is. You are now talking about something that is really important, and you've been doing it for a fucking year, but it is not easily classifiable. Mark
Right.
keeps talking about premature formalization, right? And when you write something down, you clarify it, and that's not always necessarily good. But I think that, I would love to add to the book a thing where, because what you're asking for is so far outside and above what we're looking at. You're talking basically about the shape of thought, how it can exist inside and outside a head and connect with others. And you don't do the cheap tricks of saying knowledge graph, ontology, or taxonomy. So
Yeah.
it has to be captured. And the reason you're a bad writer in terms of the future of text is the opposite of being stupid. Your ideas are too deep for easy writing down. So now that I made this massively long thing, could you please do that?
All right. I will do that.
The thing,
Yeah, I look forward to it. I think it's an interesting thought, but I didn't get my head all the way around it. So I look forward to
Yeah,
that.
it was a truncated version of it. Luckily, I've already written some stuff on it that will hopefully be a little more clear, but probably not.
well,
We
the,
can but try.
the thing is, in this community here, we are really trying to help the world think and communicate better. And obviously, the aspects of that are vast. But over the many, many years I've been working at it in my neck of the woods, of course, others have been working on it too. It's been very, very difficult to get the what in the world and the baseline realities to connect.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think that one of the things we have to do is, write our book so that one day some student or whoever will come across a quote like what you just said, and it'll inspire something in them. And the reason I'm saying it is, humanity, on one level, some people watch football, right? We were in town when Morocco won, and basically tube stations had to be shut down. People get excited, fair enough.
Wow.
But it's just a weird thing, to identify with the team, whatever. And then we have all these layers of being, not necessarily better or worse. I'm not that arrogant, but people live for their own time scale or longer time scales. They live for their family or their city, all that stuff. The kind of thing you're talking about there leads so much further, but there's so much little connection for it.
Well, I'm glad to hear the excitement. I hope to continue to talk about it with the group, because it's it does tie into VR without it being really I feel like VR is a part of it, but also our objects and our whiteboards are a part of it. And hopefully even a mix of physical and digital objects, which is really what I want to see.
Well, Jermaine, to your point, and because is that when you start talking about the shape of things, I found myself, this won't surprise you, but thinking of, avoiding premature formalization, I was thinking, oh, actually, what if I rather than having something very spiky and hard edged or soft or whatever, that basically I had something that literally was more like a cloud. There is a point, this thought may be bigger than that thought. This short doesn't, it doesn't have a shape here. Because when you first mentioned that idea of the shape of things, I was thinking, oh yeah, so this is this also borders on, synthesia in a way. You're not deliberately, but this idea of moving from one sensory domain to another. And I just thought, I'm now quite captivated by the idea of actually having quite the opposite, of having sort of things in the environment that, in a sense, well, the question is this: how would you make something that effectively has sort of no shape, or looks like it has no shape, until you choose to give it one? Because you're absolutely right. There comes a point. Part of the formalization is that that you can usefully move to a point where this thing is definitely one of these, whatever these are, which is I find the really interesting part of sort of knowledge exploration and creation, of sort of getting to the point where you have some degree of certainty about something, whereas before it was a possibility. But there are other ways it could be explained, or there are other ways it could be understood.
Yeah, it's funny that as far as the physical object goes, that's difficult, but a lot of the inspiration for this exploration comes from Morphospace by a scientist named Levin, and it's very, no, actually, yeah, there's that part, but there's also AlphaFold and protein folding. And the interesting part about the protein folding is when the model is trying to figure out what the protein is going to be shaped like, it starts with a 0 point. It doesn't have a canvas like we're used to thinking. It's first off, it's a quadernons that it's using, but all of the atoms start at a sort of a singularity, right? A 0 point, and then as it gets riddled with metadata, they start to push out, and the shape of the protein starts to come together as it's getting further distanced. And I think that there's a lot that maybe foolishly but interesting anyway to see that this is sort of how ideas come about. Like, we have these atoms that we don't even have names for, that are parts of ideas before they even get to names.
Yeah.
And as the associations start to cluster in our heads, we associate, to my version of book has these frictions and these attractions, but it's not quite a bag of words either. Anyway.
Well, I love the idea of sort of, in a sense, your thought object having frictions as well. So as it moves through the thought space, some things will slide off. So throw something down an icy pavement, it'll go a long way. If it's dry, it won't.
Yeah, I got to go in a second.
Me too.
Here, but yeah, I think we all do, but which is cool. I just want to say, you mentioned the M word, metadata, and I think we need to have some deeper discussions on that because I think there is some inherent metadata that an object can carry with it, like a piece of wood in a video game or like a document. But there's also the external metadata, and there's the to and from metadata. Like, Mark and me clearly have different understandings of who the other person is than we do ourselves. So that's an external and an internal one. And then you, looking at the two of us, you have a very different metadata for the relationship between Mark and me. So that is a metadata,
Yes.
metadata, right? And once these things become hard, like Mark, you're talking about hard and soft, it becomes a little artificial in all meanings of that word. But I still think we need to keep pushing. I mean, that's one of the reasons I'm, trying to get through this book and similar. Also, at this point, interestingly, is this one. Just
Is it
understand.
interesting?
Yeah, this is the one that said, it was a quote that I read on Friday, but since you couldn't be there, let me see if I can find it. No, I bloody well can't. It's Arthur Schopenhauer, who says, we can do what we will, but do we really have the ability to choose what we will? Do we have the ability to choose what we want? That was in the 1800s, and it's like, hang on, that perspective on the notion of free will or not is just so dead on. Why have we been wasting so many decades for getting his quote?
It happens all the time. Yeah, the old ones are fantastic. So many ideas
Well, it's in the book
that get
now.
overlooked.
Yeah.
All right. Well, it's a pleasure seeing you all again. And
Yeah, I look forward to Friday, and I'm not going to Norway now because of my mother, so meetings will be easy. Please, before the end of the night, send me a thing. If it's a sentence, a paragraph, a page or two, it really doesn't matter. But just think of this in 20 years, high school student reading that sentence being inspired. That's all we want.
all right.
The video.
like
will-
that.
Sending positive vibes
all.
for your four-legged friend.
Yes, good luck. I'll post a tweet with the link when it's up, just so that.
All right. Thanks.
Bye for now. Bye.